As The Little Mermaid and Peter Pan and Wendy begin to circle the drain, along with other live-action remakes from the Walt Disney Company, it is time to call in the heavy artillery, bring in the big defense to try to save the company, shore up investors, and convince the worldwide intelligentsia that everything is okay at the House of Mouse. Let's go through it and dissect it and find out what's wrong, what's right, and what's not all right with the House of Mouse. All right, folks, and it is another beautiful day out there for each and every one of you. Some of you are having great days, some of you are having terrible days. Those come for us all. I hope that this part of the day is a little bit better than it would be otherwise. Thank you for joining me. If you like content like this, consider clicking the like button, share, subscribe, and stick it to the algorithms by clicking it. It's the notification bell. All right, we are taking a look at an article from the New York Times. We have waited a bit to get into this, and we've done that for a reason. This has been behind a paywall, and also when we're dealing with articles such as that, we try to wait a few days to make sure that we're doing everything in the most ethical, kosher way possible. We're also going to be looking at this in segments rather than reading the entire article, and therefore we are not trying to violate anything with the New York Times. Now, before we get into this article, I do want to say that there was breaking news, and I put that in quotes, about the potential for Lucasfilm to be sold, or Star Wars, or some part of it, to be sold from the Walt Disney Company back to George Lucas. We will be dealing with that rumor at the very beginning of the Pro Show Live. That will be Thursday, June 8th from 5 to 7 p.m. Eastern Time. We will have our expert panelists on, ready to talk about it. And we're going to talk about why that is exceedingly unlikely, exceedingly difficult for Disney to sell Star Wars to anyone, let alone George Lucas. And we have invited some rather large guests to help us go through that. But today we're taking a look at the New York Times. This is not a small deal, and it's important for us to understand this. We are attempting to explain entertainment, keep you ahead of the culture curve. It says, the man reimagining Disney classics for today's world. Sean Bailey is in charge of live-action remakes of films like The Little Mermaid. It's a job that puts him in the middle of a partisan divide. And you can see that what's being attempted here right off the starting block is make it seem that Sean Bailey is directly in the middle. He is a neutral observer of the world. And essentially what this article is going to attempt to do is make it so that you believe that he's a totally innocent man trying to thread the needle in a world that is highly partisan and divided. But no, he's not part of that. And then they're going to bury at the very end the truth. This is by Brooks Barnes. For more than a decade, Sean Bailey has run Disney's animated film reimagining factory. You know, there's a lot of reimagining going on at Disney. Some of it people don't like. With quiet efficiency and superhero-sized results, his live-action Aladdin collected $1.1 billion at the box office. And folks, by the way, adjusted for inflation, that is $1.4 billion because of just how rampant inflation has been, especially with movie ticket prices. That only came out in 2019, by the way. It's also a contentious film now because Disney has not done anything with the lead actor from Aladdin, he being Coptic Christian and Egyptian descent, and he's none too happy about that he led up a billion-dollar film and got absolutely nothing in return. And so now that is being used as a wedge device as people argue because, well, The Little Mermaid is on track to make less than half of that, and yet that's without adjusted inflation. In other words, The Little Mermaid may have 1/3 the audience. It's a big deal. While a photorealistic The Lion King took in $1.7 billion, a live-action Beauty and the Beast delivered $1.3 billion. Now, what's not talked about in this article, and we need to do this because, again, you come to this channel for a reason. We are here to explain entertainment. What is happening largely with these live-action remakes is not that they are doing phenomenally well domestically. They do fine. But what's really happening here is that these numbers are derived from huge swaths of Chinese moviegoers going to see these films because often they have never seen the cartoons before. You see, nowadays, the Chinese population is behind a digital curtain. That is to say that they do not have access to the same internet that we do or most of the rest of the world does. They are largely censored away. However, they have for a very long time been completely walled off, and that included entertainment. And so at the time that many of these films came out, they were not allowed to see them. So The Lion King, for example, that's the first Lion King they've really been exposed to. They've never had the experience of the animated version coming out in theaters and being a big deal. Now, could they see it today? Sure. But it being an older movie and not being part of a theatrical release, not that many are going to take that up as a cause to go watch it. But the photorealistic CGI, well, that's a big deal, and that's what's driving this. The other thing to note that's not told in this article is that of that Chinese audience that's driving much of this live action remake revenue, and by the way, it's good for Disney because they want to drive those audiences to the parks that are in China, so no issues there. But the percentage that the company gets back is somewhere between 20 and 25% off of these. So even though these numbers look great, they're really not that impressive compared to what the revenue haul is for the rest of the world. Anyway, Disney likes the cash. The company also views Mr. Bailey's remake operation as crucial to remaining relevant. Disney's animated classics are treasured by fans, but most showcase ideas from another era, especially when it comes to gender roles. Be pretty girls and things might work out. Now, this again is attempting to shore up support with the elites. That's what this article is completely about. That's why it's in the New York Times. Who knows what was said between Disney and the New York Times, between Brooks Barnes and the C-suite at Disney, but they need to get the word out. They need to defend this because they have many more live action remakes coming, and they're likely to also do just as poorly as The Little Mermaid. And so that's what this article is all about. Let's read one more paragraph and then let's skip down. The reimaginings, as Mr. Bailey refers to his remakes, and again, folks, remember that they're doing Reimagine tomorrow, and that has come out and that has gotten them in all kinds of trouble. Reimaginings find ways to make Disney stories less retrograde. In other words, Walt sucks. That's really what this is about. The man, Walt, who made these movies, and then the people who came after him who made these films, they're retrograde themselves. Their beliefs are retrograde. Their ideas are retrograde. And therefore, they need to be retuned because they're insufficient. His heroines are empowered, and his casting emphasizes diversity. A live-action Snow White set for release next year stars the Latina actress Rachel Zegler, very Latina name, as the princess known as the fairest of them all. I don't suppose, though, we will see anyone of European descent playing the Black Panther anytime soon. Yara Shahidi played Tinkerbell in the recent Peter Pan and Wendy. It was a huge hit, folks. Don't forget, a huge hit. Not so much. Making her the first Black woman to portray the character on screen. And Mr. Bailey says, we want to reflect the world as it exists. Now, the problem with that, of course, is that these films and these fairy tales were never made to reflect the world as they exist. And this is a new age approach, a new idea, this postmodern, neo-Marxist idea of attempting to diversify everything to the point that you are willing to sacrifice the specificity and the authenticity of the product. So it doesn't matter if your product is set in Europe in the 1400s, let's say. It should not look as if it is set in Europe in the 1400s in terms of racial backgrounds and the hiring thereof. However, if it appears in China, let's say, in the 1400s, well, then it should only feature individuals of Chinese descent. And if you need to record it next to a concentration camp and give thanks to the Chinese government that runs said concentration camp, well, have at it. All right, let's drop down here. So we're going to more of this defense, okay? It's all about defense. It's all about defense, and that's because there's a huge amount of money on the line for this. So support for Miss Bailey, notably from people of color and film critics, has been offset by a torrent of racist commentary on social media and movie fan sites. Others have blasted The Little Mermaid for failing to acknowledge the horrors of slavery in the Caribbean. A few LGBT, okay, now notice here, a few, now that's purposeful, right? We insert this so that we frame this the way we want it to be. This is less than. A few LGBTQ people have criticized Disney for hiring a straight male makeup artist for the villainous Ursula, whose look in the animated film was inspired by a drag queen. Disney has long regarded these kinds of social media storms as tempests in teapots, trending today, replaced by a new complaint tomorrow. In 2017, for instance, a theater in Alabama refused to play the live-action Beauty and the Beast because it contained a 3-second glimpse of two men dancing in each other's arms. It became a global news story. Ultimately, The fracas seemed to have no impact on ticket sales. Now, of course, because this is a defense article, there's no mention of the Chinese issue with Mulan at all. That was far bigger of a kerfuffle for the company. No mention of it at all. And this goes on essentially to say, well, the world has changed, and now these social media uprisings are different, right? It doesn't just go away. And then it goes on to more defense of Mr. Bailey. In 2014, for instance, Mr. Bailey flew to Budapest from Los Angeles at a moment's notice to have dinner with Angelina Jolie. She had agreed to star in Maleficent, but seemed to be getting cold feet after reading a revised script. And honestly, we don't blame her. Those movies weren't good. Whatever he told her worked. Maleficent and a sequel took in a combined $1.3 billion. Notice the framing here again, folks, when you're reading these articles. What does that mean that they brought in a combined $1.3 billion? Well, it means that divided equally, let's say, $750 million each. Okay, $750 million each, fine. What's the production on them? Probably 200. What's the marketing on them? Probably another 100. What's that bring it out to? $300 million for production on those, let's say. All right. And then if it makes 300 million, then what does it need to break? Or if it costs 300 million, what does it take to break even? About 600 million. Okay. What if a huge chunk of that comes from China? Well, you need more. So for the return on investment, although those probably did make some money, they didn't make much. So this is a defense, a constant defense in this article. Sean is what we don't see often these days, and certainly not in film, Miss Jolie said by email. He's consistent, stable, and decent. When we have challenges, as all films do, he is even and fair. It may not be exciting for a story, but it is what we need more of. Seems to me that Mr. Bailey may have some friends over at the New York Times and may be worried about these job cuts. We'll see how that goes. Let's drop all the way down. There's a ton to this article. I do recommend that everybody who can read it, go read it over the New York Times. But here's what we end up with, and this is really the funny part. We have to go all the way to the very bottom. And it's like, I don't even know why they tell the truth at the end. You've spent so much time saying things that are so misleading that why tell the truth at the end? I mean, I commend you for finally doing it in some ways. In some ways, I just think, well, this is idiocy. Here's what it says. Every studio has been struggling to come up with original hits, but the added glare that seems to come with any Disney effort adds a degree of difficulty. No. If you slap the name Disney on something, you ought to make more money easily, just by virtue of the fact that it has a name that once was well respected with families. Like Mr. Iger, Mr. Bailey does not hide his political leanings. Oh, really? Now, wait a minute. New York Times, Brooke Barnes. I thought this was a neutral guy who's in the middle, navigating the company through a tempest, right? Remember, he's in the middle. What? He is close to Senator Cory Booker, Democrat of New Jersey. Wait a minute. Can you imagine? Let's, folks, just imagine for a moment. Just imagine that we got to the end of an article, and it said, like Mr. Iger, Mr. Bailey does not hide his political leanings. He is close to Senator Ron Paul. Can you imagine? Like, if it was on the other side, do you think they would downplay this and for paragraph after paragraph pretend that this man is a moderate? I mean, just come out and say it. And I don't know why, if you are someone who's doing remakes, reimaginings of classic fairy tales, why you would be a political person. I don't understand that. Like, how many worlds do you want to exist in? Is there some reason that this man who is close to Senator Cory Booker is also the guy who's making your fairy tales for your children? Like, I don't think there's anything nefarious there. I don't have anything against Cory Booker. But, if it came out on the other side, people would be up in arms on the other side. And I just think it's funny. When Mr. Bailey held a fundraiser for him in Hollywood, talking about the friendship all the way back to 2000, and then it goes on to try to dismiss that and be like, well, he also has lots of other friends like Ben Affleck, Dwayne Johnson. Those are people in entertainment. Of course he has friends, quote unquote, who are, in entertainment. That's what he does. He's in entertainment. But Mr. Bailey is in the business of making movies for everyone, even though he's partisan. Don't you love it? That challenge is part of what keeps his job interesting, he said. How do you deal with audiences that are changing outside our country? He's talking about China, by the way. How do you deal with a country that you're trying to appease in every way possible? Inside our country, Mr. Bailey said. How do you tell stories that matter to everyone in a world that is increasingly polarized, he says, as he polarizes. And so there you have it, folks. Now, why do we do this? Why do we bring up this article? Well, we bring up this article because these sorts of things don't appear in the elitist newspapers with this kind of length. I mean, look at the length of this article. This doesn't appear unless somebody is very nervous. This is essentially a please don't fire me, I'm doing great article. That's what this is. So who ordered this article be written? Why was it worthy of having this much effort put into it? I don't know. I can only tell you that I bet that this is intended to stabilize, dissuade investors from leaving as they look at what is surely going to be very poor box office returns for these live action remakes. Look at what's happening with Little Mermaid. It's going to get worse. Look at what's going to happen with Snow White. It's going to get worse. Look at what happened with Peter Pan and Wendy. It can't get worse. So that's what is happening. They are in full defense mode. And if you want to know how a company is doing, look for the defense. This is the defense that says, please don't fire me. Please believe we're still doing what we need to. Don't believe your lying eyes. Even though I'm best buddies with Cory Booker and doing these fundraisers, I'm not at all partisan at all. And it's funny. So folks, if you like content like this, consider clicking the like button, share, subscribe, and stick it to the algorithms. When you click it, we're talking about the notification bell. Drop a comment down below. What do you think? Are these live action remakes in trouble? And are they in such trouble now that the New York Times needs to run defense for the Walt Disney Company to protect it? Love to hear what you have to think and what you have to say. And folks, don't forget the Pro Show is 5 to 7 p.m. Eastern Time. Tomorrow, if you're watching this video at the time it comes out, every Thursday we do the show. And of course, the show coming this week is a big deal, as we'll be dealing with that rumor about Star Wars and Lucasfilm potentially being sold. It's going to be a lot of fun. Can't wait to see which guests are able to make it. Also, folks, we have the 20,000 subscribers celebration this Saturday, June the 10th, I believe. Yes, June the 10th, and that will be at 6 p.m. Eastern Time. We'll be leading into Echo-Based Network from that show. We're going to have a lot of fun, lots of guests. It's going to be a really big celebration, big party. I am overwhelmed with gratitude for each and every one of you who have chosen to be subscribers to this channel. You mean the world to everything we're trying to do. Truly, you're the electricity that drives it all. Folks, wherever you are, whatever you're doing, keep learning, keep growing, keep having fun.
Make sure to catch the Pro Show Thursdays 5 to 7 Eastern Time. Entertainment Explained, The Culture Curve Conquered, live with Pro and all his friends.